Hello, Mavericks. This is Rob Reinhold. I'm joined by Mr. Ankit Sharma, and here we are. It is almost the end of May. I cannot believe how fast this year is going by. But look, whenever it's a busy, great trading sessions, the weeks seem to fly on by, and trading this year has been fantastic. So this week, we started off with a nice little bounce on Monday, Tuesday. And if you remember, last week, we bottomed out on Thursday and had a really nice reversal candle. Now, I came on last weekend and said, hey, I think that is a durable bounce. What I meant by durable means it doesn't just bounce a couple days and fizzles out. I said, I think this is going to bounce for about a week or two. Well, the market has never really listened to me. It's never listened to what I think it should do, and it does its own thing. And that's exactly what we did. We bounced from Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday was just a brutal killer day. We got absolutely hammered on Wednesday. Thursday, we looked to recover, and then it faded all off by the end of Thursday. Friday, it was a disaster. We gapped up. We plunged lower. Market's down 3%. And we recovered near the end of it to where it's now looking like, oh, we didn't break below the low. So let's take a look at... So this was the seventh straight week of losses. And we saw the selling pressure widen to a lot of the things that had held up nicely, like commodities and consumer discretionary. They got hammered. Now, on Friday, the S&P hit down 20%. Now, it's not going to close down 20% as we got a recovery at the end of the day. But we are down 20%, and that is a bear market. NASDAQ is down almost 30%. And the cryptocurrency slaughter continued. Again, 2 weeks ago, Luna went from 1 to 0. Everyone was really freaked out about that, and that's still weighing on sentiment. Right now, people are not looking at cryptos as safe. They're looking at them as the riskiest thing they could put their money in, so that's why the money's coming out of them. Not a whole lot of economic reports. Retail sales in the U.S. up 1%. CPI in the U.K. about as expected, but employment on Australia dropped below the expected levels. So if we take a look at the charts, let's see what everything did. Now again, these are not end of week numbers. We're doing this session on Friday afternoon, so that S&P may only be down 2 or 3% by the end of it. Cryptos may only be down, 4 or 5%. We did get a nice rally while we were making this session. So let's take a look at the S&P. So as you can see, a really nice recovery. And I was just telling Ankit, I don't counter trend trade much at all. I'm a trend guy. But this is one of my favorite patterns. When something comes down to support, pierces it, and then comes back up. Now, if you think about, and again, I'm doing some third order poker / trading as far as, when we broke below that last low, people panicked, people sold, they dumped, but there was no follow through behind it. And there was actually people that came in and bought that dip. That is just showing you that there are buyers lurking around. Now look, this candle does not really mean anything until next week. We need to see at least another green candle or two before we can say that that was a reversal candle. But at this point, it's looking okay. It's very probable that that is a reversal candle. The problem is, where's the upside? We're going to go up to the moving average, hit that, fall back down. We're going to go up to resistance, hit that, fall back down. So we are looking at a shorter term bounce, kind of like we got over here, that's most likely going to get sold into. We take a look at currencies. The big standout is the Swiss franc. Now, the SNB came out and said, hey, we are ready to raise interest rates aggressively, which the market hadn't believed until SNB's Jordan actually said that. So we saw the Swiss franc that was really listless before that jump substantially. Now, look, once it jumped, it didn't do anything after that. There was no follow through. So we need to see some more follow through from Swiss franc. The dollar finally pulled back. And again, it pulled back on a weak tape in the stock market. That's pretty important because, again, as the market's gone lower, the dollar's gone higher, it's been a safe haven. This week, people said we don't want the dollar anymore as a safe haven. So we'll take a look at the trend on this one, though. It's still in an uptrend, but we definitely could be seeing a trend change. It's too early to say whether or not we are, but it's definitely possible. Everything else pretty mixed across the board. The CAD following the US dollar lower. These two have been fairly correlated lately, so that is no surprise there. So that CAD is mostly probably just dollar weakness. And you can see cryptos were, again, a slaughter again. After going down 34% last week, Solana and Cardano decided to go down another 15%. So as you can see, it's really ugly out there. We have been very, very bearish in cryptos. It's been a -3 for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. So everything continues to be bearish. If you want to say which one did the best, well, guess what? Litecoin actually held in and did the best. So let's take a look at our outlook for the market this week. Okay, so we've got this, again, look at these charts. Everything's going lower. We've got the S&P. We just talked about the S&P. Let's take a look at this VT. As you can see here, we did not make even pierce below this last low. This is a really good sign here. If we can get a bounce and recover and break through this level, it's going to be a sign that maybe that really was the bottom. So international equities are leading US equities here. They're actually doing better. And if we see this breakout of this resistance area and the 20-period moving average, that could be a sign that, okay, we are seeing a bottom in the markets. If we don't, then again, there's going to be absolutely more selling. Now, cryptos, we have not liked cryptos. Huge fall here. And you can see here, we've just based. There were a couple of days where cryptos were up 7, 8%, but there were a bunch of days where they were down 10, 12, 15%. It's not good price action. Cryptos are still very, very bearish. There's no reason at all to be in the crypto game. Let's take a look at the calendar next week. We've got not a whole lot. We have Chairman Powell speaks on Wednesday. And then we've got the RBNZ rate statement he speaks on Tuesday. And on Tuesday night, we've got the RBNZ statement. We will be meeting live for that one. So come join us live. We're going to be taking a look for a trade around that announcement. The next day, we get FOMC minutes. These have been moving the markets lately. For a long time, we told you just ignore these. The last 3 or 4 Fed minutes, we have seen markets move off this. So be ready on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Really, the rest of the week, U.S., it says preliminary GDP. It is not preliminary. It's the third reading of GDP. It's the last reading that no one cares about. So ignore that one. And on Friday, we've got an inflation number. This is the core PCE index. This is the index that the Fed has told us that is their favorite index to look for inflation. So next week here, again, the markets are trying to find a bottom here. They're attempting to find a bottom. We had a try earlier in the week and it just got slammed down. We pierced below lows and then it got rescued. It is definitely, I think, a coin toss here. And I am definitely not looking to stick my neck out and say which one I think it's going to be. The only reason I would lean more to the bullish side than bearish side is that I really think a week ago with the spike of the VIX up to 34, I think we did get a capitulation bottom. Now, again, the market doesn't have to do anything I think it should do. We could easily turn back down, but I do think this market is looking for a bottom. And so I think what we're going to see is a lot of what we saw this week is the market drifting lower and then having these violent spikes back. And then it drifts lower and a spike back. During that kind of trading, realize that things can switch from day to day. One day it could be risk on and one day it could be risk off. And you really have to be fluid. So we got RBNZ on Tuesday, Chairman Powell also on Tuesday, and FOMC minutes on Wednesday. So let's take a look at the currencies one by one. Let's see what all their scores are. We're looking for a trend score and we're looking for a velocity score. Let's start off with Bitcoin. Now Bitcoin at a -2, and you can see we got a big nasty candle here. So I'm going to downgrade this one to a -3. And you can see here, Bitcoin was pretty much just hanging out, had a little bit of momentum going into this last week. And this week, we're going to downgrade this to a -3. We just broke below parabolic SAR. We're trading at the bottom of this range. RSI is looking terrible. So again, there's no reason at all to be bullish cryptos here. We come over here to Bitcoin Cash. It was already in a -3. We are still at a -3. Everything looking bearish. If we go to the velocity chart, the 4-hour chart, you can see it's not as bearish as Bitcoin. So we're going to give this a -2 for the week. We go to Ethereum. Ethereum was at a -3. We're going to stay at a -3. And you can see the velocity, which was kind of, just hanging out. We've now lost it quite a bit. We are down here at -2. And if we break below this low, that is definitely going to be some trouble here on Ethereum. And then Litecoin. Litecoin was the only coin to be able to come back above the falling 20-day MA. So it's a -2. Look, it means it's better than the rest. Everything else was at a -3. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you should buy it. But if we do get a turn in cryptos, it's kind of telling you that Litecoin is being bought right now. People are liking it more than everything else. The problem is everything looks terrible on it. We just broke below parabolic SAR. Same thing here. If we break this support level, it's going to be another washout. So watch out below on these. So crypto is pretty easy. It's all bearish. Nothing good to say there on cryptos. Let's get into foreign currencies. So we had the dollar. It was at a +3 up here. And you can see we have come back substantially. We've come all the way back. Again, this is on a 12-hour chart. Come back to the 50-period moving average. Now, this is do or die here for dollar. If it doesn't bounce here, then this breakout, this really great trend that we enjoyed for 2 months is sadly over and needs to be put in the grave and buried because it's done. It's over. If we break below this the 50 MA, it's done. So we have to realize that the dollar is not as strong as it once was as a trend. The velocity is actually getting worse. So we're at a -1 here on velocity. It's just telling us it probably wants to move a little lower. Early next week is going to be a very good indication on where the dollar is going. If the dollar has some weakness Monday, Tuesday, I think you can be short the dollar for the first time in I don't know how long. If we hold and the markets sell off, then I think you want to be long dollar here on a really nice pullback. Again, I think it's a coin toss. A coin toss means you have no chance of beating a coin toss, so don't even try. So dollar, we are watching and waiting, and probably by Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll have a really good idea. Now, the yen, on the other hand, has really started to change after getting absolutely smoked and just hammered here. We came up, set a higher high. We came down, we set a higher low. We chopped in this range for a bit. We broke out, pull back, and lately it's been really messy. This has been really messy price action. So while the trend has strengthened a little bit, the velocity is really still it's not there. Look at the velocity. We're not seeing any short-term movement here. Again, this is just choppy price action that we saw up here in the 12-hour chart. So there's just nothing going on here. Ankit, I know you've been talking a lot about yen. What is your thought on yen here?
Well, hey, Rob. Well, what an interesting time this year as we've seen these massive move in currencies. And, we talk about correlations and, it's been an interesting year where correlation really hasn't played out as much. And as much as we talk about yen, I think yen is kind of stuck in a rut here. We have seen some market regime change in the yen, which is not going lower as it was. So now we are in this phase where it just goes up and down and it's not really following a strong trend. So I think as we take a look at yen, we have seen yen rise and fall really fast, which is telling me that the yen is not really ready to pick a direction. Bank of Japan is still one of the most dovish central banks out there. So I think that's going to keep the yen still on the down low with some periods where the yen do well. So I think yen is a good currency to be flexible on, but just realize there's a lot of pull and tug happening. So not really following that correlation, but it's just doing its own thing. And especially as the dollar kind of backs off, I think that's helped the yen a little bit this week. But overall, I'm not really as optimistic on the yen here, because if the market bottoms out, and let's just say that will push to put the pressure down on the yen to go down lower. So I think it's just going to be more like selling on these rallies, a good opportunity. So that's what I'm looking at again, Rob.
I completely agree. I think the yen is a very tricky trade here. It has held up nicely on the days where the markets went up. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, every day the market went up, the yen would get hammered down 1-2%. This week, when we had a few up days, the yen actually did pretty well. So it's showing me, okay, it no longer wants to crash on good days, but it's not really rising on bad days. And so it puts it in this kind of middle ground where it's not really doing anything. So I'm with you, Ankit. I think it's something you probably just wait and see what happens. All right, we talked about Swiss franc. Swiss franc was looking very negative. Take a look at how negative it looked over here. We are at a -2 here on the trend, and we've got to bump this up. A huge jump up 3 spots. Here, we are now went from below moving averages to above moving averages in a week. As you can see here, the last 3 candles haven't gone anywhere. So that's a big jump. We think there's going to be some consolidation. I think you have to wait for Swiss franc to break out of the top of this range before you can really say that, hey, it is a real nice uptrend at this point. The velocity is showing you that it's there, but it's flattening out. Again, it's flattening out. I think the Swiss franc is a couple days away from telling us whether or not it's able to continue on its gains that it put in last week. So we're at a +1. That is just not strong enough to look for a trade. Now here we are at euro. Euro last week, we were at a 0 and a 0. And guess what? This week, we are at a 0 and a 0. Nothing changed on euro. There is no reason at all right now to be trading euro. Until it gives us a signal that it has some energy, it's a no trade. The pound is sitting right here between moving averages. So it's pinned between moving averages. It was at a -2. It was coming lower here. You can see we actually made a recovery, moved up here. So we're going to move the trend score up to a -1. So it's no longer a super bearish currency. But if you take a look at the velocity, it actually has gotten a little bit better. We're starting to see a little bit more movement. We had this little pullback here. We can see on Friday, we actually broke out of that range. RSI is starting to steepen up here, running into the 60s. The problem is, look at the overhead resistance. There's a lot of overhead resistance here. Until we can get out of some of these things and start to put in a trend, pound is going to be not all that great. If we can move out of these levels and get above moving averages, get a better trend score, I'm willing to look at pound, but that's not going to be until later next week. Now, I hope everyone has noticed that a lot of currencies we took a look at that were trending strongly have stopped trending strongly. And we saw this in the percentage moves last week. We were getting 2-3% moves in currencies over the last 6 weeks. Last week, things were mostly up 0.5% or less. It's showing you that things are starting to change. The things that were strong, they've been weakening a bit. The things that have been weak, they've been strengthening a bit. So last week we had CAD at a +3, and it was really good in the early parts of the week. Broke out to a new high. You can see at the end of the week, it has really done the same thing that the dollar did. So we saw a dollar pull back to a 50-period moving average. Right now, dollar and CAD are quite highly correlated. Do or die here for the CAD, same as the dollar. If it bounces here, it's still a long, go ahead and buy it. If it doesn't bounce here, we break down, again, this trend. You can go ahead and put that in the gray because it's done. It's gone. Look, it doesn't mean that it's going to crash. We could simply trade sideways here, but it's definitely a signal that this trend is over. So the trend has deteriorated, and the velocity has deteriorated even more. We're at a -1. So short term, this has more momentum than the dollar to the downside. We're at a +1 on dollar. This is a -1. So we do think CAD is likely to break below these levels. Any insight on CAD, Ankit?
You're spot on this analysis. Again, I think it's very important in the markets to know when the regime is changing. Dollar is a great example. This week, when the dollar should have done well, again, we saw 4% down in the markets. I mean, the dollar has been acting as a safe haven currency, and suddenly the same things that you would do for the last 6 weeks is not working anymore. And I think that's the good indication that there's a bit of a regime change. Now, the big question is, do we just, reverse straight down, or do we chop around a little bit here? So I think we can do one of the other possibilities. Next 3 weeks are very crucial because we have all of these central banks that are on the deck, and they are all going to give us guidance on their further forecast. So we might see a bit of a pause until we run into those events, but I think it's good to point out that when the party's over, as we call it, the regime is changing, and you have to change with the markets. And I think that's a very important key thing to kind of go through all these charts to see when stop doing the same thing as you would do for the last few weeks. So I think we are pretty much at a crossroad. And whenever we are at a crossroad, things could stagnate a little bit. Things could, chop around for a little bit. I think that's something we need to kind of expect. They're not showing as much outperformance, but they're not showing as much as underperformance. Like this week was a good example. Like the participation in currencies were not as much, even on the rallies or on the breakdown. So it's just giving me constraints on the price action. So we may get some boost in the next week or so when we start to get these central banks. But I think this is where we need to kind of bring our expectation down a little bit. And instead of, looking at a +3, now the scores are like a +1 to a -1. So we need to set expectations accordingly and get ready for the next big move wherever it comes from. It could come from a market reversal, and it could also come from the central banks, and they provide these guidance. And I think that's what's driving a lot of these movement in these currencies. So I think buckle up. Next few weeks is going to be very interesting.
And by buckle up, I think what you're saying is there's going to be choppiness, but no real direction. Is that correct?
Absolutely. This is where we're gonna go on this choppy road, and we could find uncomfortableness in between. And I think that's where it is. Like last few weeks, it's been amazing. I can't tell you how happy I am with 2022 with the more movements that we have seen. But it's not always always a smooth ride, and we can kind of hit some rough road in between. I think that's what we could get in the next couple of weeks. So we can't rely entirely on correlations. I think we just have to keep an eye on the trend score and the velocity. That's what's going to guide you in the right direction. Instead of thinking, well, if this happened, then this should happen. It doesn't always go that way. And this week is a great example where things didn't go in a certain way because, markets definitely provided that catalyst, but there was no participation. So something to keep in mind.
And in that environment, you want to trade less, not more. So again, the market has been awesome the last couple of weeks. It's a sprint. It was a sprinter. It ran at the 100-yard dash. The market's tired. We're in this breather. So you don't want to trade a lot in chop because you get stopped out all the time. There's no real moves. Breakouts fail. You just want to trade a lot less. Here we have the Aussie. Aussie, we're going to stick at a -2 on the trend score and stick with the -1 on the velocity score as well. Here we've got the Kiwi. We were at -2. We're going to stick with -2. It's looking a little bit better than the Aussie. So someone said, Rob, if you had to buy the Aussie or the Kiwi, which would you buy? I would probably have to buy the Kiwi. It's a little further above the 20-day moving average. But the velocity, just not there. Just not there. Maybe going up to +1, but definitely not enough to really do anything. So let's take a look at where we were last week with trend scores. So last week with trend scores, the yen moved up a spot. It strengthened a little bit, while the dollar weakened and slid down a little bit. We saw the Swiss franc with the largest jump up 3 spots. Like I said earlier, we need to see if it can actually build on those gains. The pound strengthened a bit, still a little bit on the weak side. CAD weakened. We saw Litecoin was the only crypto that got its way out of -3 to a -2. That's still not great. No movement in the Aussie and Kiwi on the trend score. On our velocity score, we had Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin all move up to -2. Again, still not great, but just not the heaviest selling you could possibly see. We saw Swiss franc jump on the velocity score as well, up to a +1. We are waiting for Swiss franc to prove that it can actually break out. Yen weakened a bit. Dollar weakened 2 spots. Aussie and Kiwi on the velocity are seeing a little bit of buying here, just a little bit. And then that CAD, we're now weakening a bit. And we see the euro just going to 0 here. Take a look at where we are here. Remember, at Maverick, we like to trade currencies that are +2 or greater or -2 or greater. The cryptos, where we're long only, we have to throw those out. They're no good. And you can see everything is in the middle. So when we have that, it basically is saying there's no trade. Sorry, I forgot. Pound did move up. If someone said, Rob, you have to make a trade here, it would have to be pound CAD. I don't need to, I don't want to, but that would have to be the trade based on the velocity score here. But remember, we don't have to make a trade. No one's got a gun to our head. We can wait for the trades to come to us. So when we take a look at where we are, we're in no man's land. And I've got the pound at a +2, which is the greatest velocity, but it's a -1 on trend. I can't trade that. It's conflicting signals there. I've got Swiss franc that's a +1. So if it breaks out, it could definitely be a potential trade. I've got the yen at a +2, but it's showing me no velocity at the moment. And I've got the dollar that has just made that big pullback and really needs to show me what it's going to do before I jump into it. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of possible trades out there. So I'm going to look through just 1 or 2 pairs because I don't want to waste your time, because this is really going to be a week where we start the week with no expectations. And literally we are waiting and watching, and maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll look at making a trade. But right off the bat, there's no reason to make any sort of trades on Monday, Tuesday, in my opinion. So let's start off with the one I said, pound CAD. Look, I'm not saying this is the greatest trade in the world. It's not, but it's the best trade that we can make at the moment. At the moment, this is the one that's showing the greatest velocity on the upside and the greatest velocity on the downside. And what I'm seeing here, again, this is mostly sideways price action, but we were definitely moving more lower back here from these highs. And now we're moving more higher. It doesn't mean that it's the greatest thing in the world that's going to take off, but you can see this resistance here at 160.35. Once we break that, it would be a reasonable expectation to say, okay, 160.90 could be its next target. And then ultimately all the way up here at 162-ish. I don't think there's enough energy to get to that level, but there's probably enough energy to get to 160.90. It's not the greatest trade in the world. It's really the only thing I can think of talking about. Instead of going through other charts and wasting your time and saying, hey, just wait for these, I'm going to bow out here. Ankit, do you have any charts you want to take a look at?
Hey, Rob, absolutely. Again, I'm kind of focusing more on the events next week and kind of make it plan around it. So I want to primarily focus on Kiwi right now. And as we look at all the central banks, and they are all hawkish, and it seems like the Kiwi is definitely sitting at quite a discount because the past couple of times it raised and the price has gone lower. They're looking to raise rates by 25 basis points. So I think there's a trade around it. I like the Kiwi more onto the upside on that. So I'm actually looking to see where can I find a regime change? Where can I find things are changing? So I like to talk about like Aussie Kiwi. If you want to pull up those charts, I like the Aussie Kiwi because it's sitting at a major resistance. And Rob, if you want to zoom out to like a daily or a weekly chart, just to start off from the grand scheme of things there, we are kind of stalling in this area. And if we zoom back, this is a resistance that we've had for like last 7 years. So the whole risk to reward ratio looks much better to me, as this is the area where it had failed in the past. So now what we need to find is a bit of a lower high and lower low, and we know that that's a bit of a regime change. So as you can see that we're sitting at the bottom of the range all week. We did not break. So this is where I'm finding an opportunity of a break in Aussie Kiwi, meaning Kiwi will strengthen. Again, this is a safe play because you're trying to pair up these two negatively correlated currencies, but when they deviate from each other, there's a great opportunity there. Rob, the other one I want to point out is Kiwi Cad, just to kind of be on the same guideline. I like the fact that how CAD is changing its regime. It has outperformed along with the US dollar. The US dollar did break down early this week. The Canadian dollar did not. So I think there's a short-term opportunity there where they're kind of doing the exact same thing, and we could see a change. And we're already noticing a regime change as we are trying to carve out a little short-term bottom, and we're carving higher. And if we go on a longer-term chart, we'll notice that this is also, Rob, if you want to zoom out to this level that we are bouncing from, this is a 2020 low. So again, a huge discount or levels that we have held for a long time. So that's another area that I'm looking at as well. And again, I like those 4-hour charts of kind of giving me confirmation. We're getting a nice little daily candle here. So I think there could be a further incline, especially if you look at the performance since March. I mean, we have seen quite a bit of lows there. So this is a trade I would like to get behind as well. So these are the two I'm watching right now. Of course, dollar will be something we'll be paying attention to as well. We can take a look at Kiwi dollar. If the dollar continues to decline, we can actually take a look at Kiwi against all other currencies like the Kiwi dollar or even Kiwi yen. The thing is, if there's a good opportunity in Kiwi, I think all the pairs would give us a good opportunity on a bit of a reversal. So that's what Rob, I'm watching. I think Aussie has held really well, but maybe we could see that shift and the Aussie will then shift into the Kiwi. So that's what I'm looking at. And of course, we'll be taking a look at market volatility, and especially with the reversals that we saw today. I think Monday will make an interesting day as well. So that's my game plan for going next week.
And Ankit, you always trade these markets much better than I do. I'm a big macro story kind of trader, whereas I see these big waves coming in and out of the markets, and so I do mostly negatively correlated pairs where I'm always in like I'm in like Aussie yen, Kiwi dollar, where they're negatively correlated most of the time. Where Ankit is so much better is in these markets when those big macro stories aren't happening. He has a great ability to go in and find these little stories. He takes these currencies that are usually positively correlated that are showing some divergence, and he's just much better at identifying those. So I think those pairs much better than anything I'm looking at. Let's wrap this up. We do think the markets remain volatile, especially equities. We think that the currency market is probably less volatile. We think cryptos are probably going to stay volatile, but mostly to the downside. We just don't like them. I think there is a bottoming action happening in equities. I don't know if that was the bottom today. I don't know if it was on last week, but we're definitely seeing that kind of action where we do usually see a durable bottom. With that being said, there's no clear trade right now. So start the week off in a wait and see mode. Let things develop. Take your shots and pick your shots. Let's not trade as much until we get some better velocity scores. Thanks for joining me. Thank you, Ankit. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe. Goodbye, everyone.